Well, hey Crosskart fans, any guesses what we're doing today? Today is engine mounting day. Now, I tried to just carry this engine around to see if I could get in there. It's about 20 pounds out of my weight range, so I had the choice of hitting the gym a little harder for a month or just giving in and getting an engine hoist. But luckily, I had a Harbor Freight coupon, so I went and got it. I test fitted up, and it's gonna make it so much easier. Well worth it. I paid $229 before the coupon, and I got this leveler. Now what this is gonna do, it's gonna put it in the exact position that we want so that we can fab up all the mounts. We can check the clearance for the exhaust without the 2x4s being under it. It's going to make this incredibly easy, and I'm actually excited about it. There's a difference between fabricating and easy, enjoyable fabrication. Tools like this makes your day way more enjoyable. So let's get started on it. I've already got it hooked up. I just used the upper engine mount. Now when you get an engine, you're gonna have to decide which ones you're gonna use. This one has 4 available engine mounts. I'm gonna try to get 3 mounts in so that this is going to be very, very sturdy in there. 80 foot-pounds of torque is going to want to twist this engine. I've got my leveler hooked up on this upper one, and I'm using the valve cover bolts. Now, be very careful if you do this. It seemed like a great way to go, and if I broke these bolts, they're easy to replace and they're probably inexpensive. I've already lifted it a few times. I've had it all the way up here and no signs of any breakage. I'm keeping the swinging to a minimum, but I just know there's gonna be some people like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're using the valve cover bolts. It works. I tried it and it works. So mount it however you want. I probably could have used one of these head bolts or head studs, but I don't want to crack this loose. Now obviously this is gonna be refinished because it's ugly. It was a barn find. It was running when I got it, but it needs a little love. So let's get this thing put in there. All right, so part C41. Now this is the motor mount. I don't know if you can see it, but I've already scribed the line. And since last video, I sent my bending blocks off to be laser engraved. I'm very excited about this because it's going to make all this easier. It's going to make it so maybe you don't have to get 6 of these blocks. You can just set in the angle. So as far as the motor mount, it's 2 90-degree bends, and I'm not going to notch it at first because I made it so it's height and angle adjustable. It's part of what makes this a VF-1 is that you can use any engine because of C41 right here. Alright, so C41 is cut, but I'm not going to notch it yet because this height is adjustable. Now I put notch wrappers in just for a generic number, but in reality, we're going to measure clearance for the exhaust if we run it under, or whatever length we need to mount the engine correctly. Maybe a little bit of both. All right, so here's where we stand. I have the engine about where I want it, and I'm looking for a spot for the rear mount. Now you see that the sprocket is kind of lining up right with this pillar. Well, we have plenty of room to move it left or right. I've also been trying to get clearance for the exhaust. Now there's this slick little bracket that came on the bike that holds the 4-into-1 in place. So I want to retain that just because it's going to make everything mount up nicely, right? So I'm probably going to have to cut these off and reposition them. But this is a big part of engine mounting, is getting that engine exactly where you want it to sit where you're not going to run into any interference. The 4-2 collector is definitely in the way. These are shooting right out at the frame. So I'm just going to cut them off here, clearance that, redirect these out. We'll get this mounted up, lower it right down to minimum clearance of this bar, and work from there. All right, so the collector is modded and it's no longer going to be in the way. So now we're just going to drop it as low as we can for center of gravity and for clearance. All right, looks like we're tilted a little bit. Looks like getting rid of that tilt gives us even more clearance. Wow, that's really good. Looks like the chain is still a problem though. Doggone it. All right, so the workaround for this front sprocket chain to the rear end would be really, really complicated. So, I'm not the only one that's going to run into this. I'm sure there are other bikes that have the output sprocket high up on the case. So I just rewrote the plans. There's going to be an alternate. That's what it's going to be called. Motor mount alternate. And all I did was move this bend up 6 inches so that it will fit nearly any engine. Now it's going to make this angle a little steeper, but that can all be worked around when you do your suspension stuff. So I'm going to remake these pieces with the alternate. So you can see there's 8 inches here. So if your sprocket is 8 inches or less above your bottom point, you can use the standard. If it's higher than that, or if you just want to use it anyway to make sure you have it, you can use the C27 and C28 alternate uprights to give you more mounting ability. Now, as of the filming of this video, the update will be out. All new plans sold will just have it with it. If you've already bought the plans and you want the update, just find your original email with the link for the download and just download them again. Again, be careful about how many times you download them. There is a download limit for future updates just like this. All right, so I just got these new pieces bent up. Now the short side is the vertical according to the plans, but this actually kind of worked out great. So if you need even more room than 14 inches, this side's 14 inches to the bend, you can flip the cut wrappers, make this the start side and this the end side, and you will have 17.5 inches of straight tubing to make your motor mount from. That kind of worked out because you have the choice of 8 inches, which is the stock. You have up to 14 inches, which is the alternate, and up to 17 inches. So that's the kind of ways that you can work these plans. They're not dead set on you have to do it this way. They are workable. That's why I don't give dimensions. That's why I want you guys to use your imaginations and come up with solutions for these kinds of problems. So the name of the game now is clearances. Now a lot of engines aren't like this, but this lower motor mount lines directly up with the output sprocket, which makes it tough on us. Now as for the front mount, we have our exhaust coming down and we've got these oil coolant lines coming up. Now since I wrote the plans so that you only had to buy one bending die, 1.5 inches isn't giving me the clearance that I want. So I'm going to align this for the height. Here's our forward motor mounts. I want these tabs kind of short. I want to clear the oil lines and the exhaust. So I'm going to cut some recesses in this forward motor mount tube as well. Let's do some notching. There we go. We've got our 2 hole cuts. Now this metal here is a little too thin to just let it go and trim this. So I'm going to use the pieces I cut out. I'm going to slide them right back where they came from. And I'm going to trim and weld this all up so that it is super strong. It's not going to be as strong as the original tube, obviously, but it'll definitely be strong enough. We have no forces pushing it forward or backwards to bend this. Our forces are holding the motor out here where the motor mounts are. So you follow the line, this is all still solid tube. This is just basically connecting those 2 verticals. So it doesn't need to be insanely strong. I did this on my blue one and it turned out just fine. I've had no problems with it. And here we go. 1 forward motor mount made. Now I took my time and really smoothed this out because it's going next to oil lines and I don't want any sharp edges to get on this. I put extra weld in the joints that I had plenty to grind off. And these are on a radius mount, so we'll be able to lock this in exactly where we want for that engine. I just had an idea, and it's the whole point of how I designed these chassis. So I'm having trouble with chain clearance here. So I was gonna just fab the snot out of this to get this to line up with this front motor mount. Well, since the plans are workable, this can be moved in a 1/2 inch. We can trim our connector piece to match it, measure the distance between them, and put a notch here to have a nub hanging off for our motor mount. So we'll get chain clearance, we'll get the lower mount in, and we'll have an upper mount. It's fantastic. I'm actually excited about it. Let's do it. And just like that, it's back to being easy again. Look at the shot to this. Now I just had a 2x4, so this is actually going to sit back a little further, making this awesome. This mount also is directly in line with the travel to the bottom of our sprocket. So I'm going to run a chain roller. Now I'm just putting it on the bottom because that's not the tension side of the chain. The motor is going to be pulling from the top, leaving the bottom slacked. So I'm still going to get a graded bolt for it, but this is going to work out awesome, and I'm really excited about it. All right, so we've come to a critical point in the build, and that is the engine angle. Now I'm looking at all the clearances, double checking everything. If you look under the chain right here, this bolt is for the chain cover / slave cylinder for the clutch pass-through. So I want to clear this bolt because I want that to be strong. The exhaust, I'm going to just bring it out right through here. Maybe up here I have a cool exhaust off the back. Overall clearance from the bottom, I've got about a 1/4 inch right now, so I have a little bit to work with. Now for the angle of the engine, I use the logo. Most motorcycles, their logo is level on their bike. You don't want to go too far outside of that because your sump pump might not work correctly. The bowls, the floats won't be leveled and they won't work correctly. But you obviously see motorcycles doing wheelies for hundreds of miles. So they'll do it, but just as a standard, I don't go 5 degrees outside that level. I'm going to tilt it back probably 5 degrees. It'll give me clearance for this, clearance for the exhaust, a little more clearance under the bottom. I don't know how I would have done this without this engine hoist. I'm really glad I got it. All right, so here are the tabs. Oh, you're thinking, why 4? Well, I was looking at the mounting area and I was looking at this big giant bolt, and rather than spending 15 bucks on a new bolt that's the correct size, I am going to box the mounts. It'll make them stronger. I'll get to reuse the same bolt. It's just good all around. I like reusing things because I like to save money. And it's going to make it stronger. Look at that. Pretty nice, right? So there we are. We'll just box that in right there. And we'll box that in right there. We'll have super strong engine mounts. It's all downhill from here. Now, I told you it was all down from here. All that's left is to position where you want this. Take the measurements, make the mount. Now you can see the bolt is set up so there's not blocks. So we'll just use a single, I'll use 3/16 thick metal. Measure it out, make some long tabs. Make sure I've got good spacing from my oil coolant lines and good spacing from the exhaust. All right, so here's the initial pieces. You can see that there's just a tiny angle on them. I cut everything about a 1/16 long because you can take away material, but you can't add material. And this is just a few seconds on the grinder to get these squared up. All right, now before I weld these on, I'm gonna slide some washers between the tabs and the motor mounts, because you know what happens when you weld, it pulls everything together. To make sure the final position is exactly where I want it. Make sure I've got a little bit of clearance here, plenty of clearance for the exhaust. Make sure it's centered. Make sure these are exactly where I want them. Make sure everything is just set. Set exactly. I think I'm happy with that. Okay, now that everything's tacked in place, I'm going to make some angles to go on here just to strengthen it up, make sure we don't have to deal with it again. Too easy. All right, so the remaining motor mount is being used for our hoist, so it's kind of the moment of truth to see if we are on the right track. Oh, I like it. I like it a lot. Not gonna lie to you. Tons of clearance everywhere. It is incredibly sturdy. Now it's solid mounted, but there's bushings in the motor mounts themselves, so the vibration is going to be under control. We're not going to get any metal fatigue on the mounts themselves. This turned out really, really great. Gosh, it doesn't even feel like it needs the third. That's wild. So there we go. That's all 3 mounts. There's the forward mounts. There's the boxed lower mounts, and then the upper mounts. Now I know what you're thinking at this point, because I'm thinking the same thing. Did I weld this motor into the frame to where I can't get it out? So I welded my motor in place. I was using the upper rear mount as the engine hoist rear. When I put those tabs in and put the bolt in, it removed my rear hoist joint. So I was going to use some other bolts, but they didn't seem strong enough. And we made the two mounts that we have super robust. This upper mount actually doesn't have any anti-vibration mounting. It's just a solid piece of steel. So I think I'm going to cut these tabs off and try to go without it. We'll do some test runs to make sure, but that's where we're sitting now. I tried to pull it out with just the head bolts. No go. No go. The case is just too square and too big in the back to allow it to go around it. So if it doesn't work with just the two mounts, I'm going to make removable mounts with bolts. Should be super easy. We've got clearance to do it, but this is just sticking out too far. You can see where it's running into the case right here, and it won't allow it to come out. So that's it. I'm just going on with the two mounts. Rubber mount and rubber mount should be just fine for this application. If it's not, like I said, removable mounts, I cut those off. It came out just fine, went back in just fine. I didn't take it all the way out because the exhaust is still connected. Next step is doing the exhaust, so it seemed like a waste of time just to show you guys I could get it out. With those two mounts, it comes out easy. So, closing thoughts. I wish I had done the rear lower mounts before I made the front bracket, number 41. It worked out just fine, but just hindsight, if I'd made those, it may have gone together a little better and the tabs may not have been so long. But also at the same time, those being long gave me a chance to reinforce those mounts. So this engine's gonna be super snug in here. I know you're catching snippets of the rear end. Stay tuned. I've got all the parts to build them. I'm currently building them. I'm just not going to sell them until I test it. Too easy. 80 foot-pounds of torque, 150 horsepower, heavy go-kart, taller tires. It's going to be a good test bed for that platform. 99.9% sure it's going to work out, but you guys can't get your hands on it until it's 100% sure. It's that easy. So stay tuned. We're going to finalize the rear suspension. We're going to change those brackets on the back, switch to a single bracket like I like. I wanted to get the engine end to get that rear weight to set the preload of the shocks, just to finalize it. That's why I tack everything. I will revisit everything, including what we did today, just to make sure it can't be better. It's kind of how my mind works. Once I do something, I immediately start thinking of ways to do it better. Coming up with that new style of engine mount, I'm super excited about that. Let me know if you want me to incorporate that into the plans. But like I said, the plans don't have measurements. They're workable. So you can come up with stuff like that. This engine, more difficult to mount than the other engines just because that sprocket was in line with the motor mount. That was an easy and awesome solution to that problem. All we're doing here is finding solutions to problem on a blank canvas of your ingenuity and creativity. You guys can build this. There are so many people building these. It's fantastic. I love it so much. So we'll get the suspension finalized. Next episode is going to be driver fit up, which is like my favorite thing. And typically in the past, once the engine's been mounted, it's all downhill. So a few more work days in the garage and we'll be tearing up my lawn some. Super excited about it. So stay tuned. See you guys next time.